speak a little closer to the microphone here, so you might see a whole lot of my nose. My name's Trish Settles. I'm the Deputy Director of the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, also known as CMRPC. I'm joined tonight by Principal Planner Carrie Salva, and I've had a lot of guidance in the recent days from Geographic Information Analyst and Information Technology Guru Matt Franz, so we can pull this off without too much technology troubles. Is that right?
Other than your audio.
Other than my audio. All right, we'll keep going. If it continues to be bad after, I'll turn it over to Carrie. We'll continue, or I'll log off and try and come back on. How's that for a plan?
That's a plan.
All right, that is a plan. We're good at that. So for those of you who are not familiar with us, and I think we do have a few attendees now, CMRPC is the regional planning agency for 40 communities in southern Worcester County. We've been asked to facilitate this public hearing on behalf of 3 municipalities. I'm going to read a COVID meeting statement. Due to the current COVID-19 crisis pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020, a year tomorrow, order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, this meeting is being held remotely via Zoom. To join the meeting, visit www.zoom.us/JOIN and enter webinar ID 832-5572-3294 or by phone at 646-558-8656. The meeting will be recorded and broadcast on local public access stations and live streamed when available, and may be rebroadcast on community cable or YouTube. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, no person shall address a meeting of a public body without permission of the chair or its designee. That's me. Individuals who would like to participate should state their name and address after being recognized by the meeting facilitator. With this Zoom webinar format, only panelists and board members have active video. Everyone will be muted unless and until it is their turn to present and they have been acknowledged by the facilitators. In an effort to ensure transparency to our viewers at home, the chat function is not available. Tonight's meeting notice was legally posted by the respective planning boards. I'll now read the public hearing notice as a reminder of why we're here. In accordance with the following bylaw provisions of the towns of Douglas, Sutton, and Uxbridge, the planning boards of each town will convene a joint hearing on the application of Scannell Properties of Indianapolis, Indiana, for construction of an approximately 640,000 square foot warehouse and distribution facility to be located at 40 and 100 Lackey Dam Road in Uxbridge, but also to be located on adjacent land in Sutton, 1 and 3 Lackey Dam Road and 20R and 30R Oakhurst Road, and Douglas, map 114, parcels 3 through 6. The requested action for Douglas, zoning bylaw section 5, general regulations, section 6.1, special permit earth removal, section 9.3, special permits, section 9.4, site plan review and general bylaws, article 9, sign bylaw. For Sutton, zoning bylaw section 3.8.f.5 use table, section 4.c site plan review, section 5.d route 146 overlay district special permit, 7.a.2 special permits and general bylaw, section 5 earth removal exemption. For Uxbridge, zoning bylaw article 2 section 400-20 use special permit, section 400-42 site plan review, and general bylaw part 2 section 182-1 earth removal. An electronic file of the application materials can be viewed at https://tinyurl.com BL Google Drive. All documents or comments may be submitted to 3-town PB hearing, the email address above me, at cmrpc.org, and it will be directed to all of the planning board staff members. As a note, following the previous meeting, if you sent a comment and got a bounce back, It was simply because the former Douglas contacts email had been disabled. The comment was, however, received, and we have remedied that going forward. How's my audio doing now?
Not too bad. Can I just cover one thing, Trish?
Sure.
In the meeting, we are intentionally muting people. So if you could leave your mute on unless it's time for you to talk, then we just don't get a lot of background noise or interference. Additionally, Carrie, I believe Joseph Leonardo is one of the board members. Am I right? Can somebody? Yep, I'm getting some head shaking there.
Yes,
Thank
he is.
you.
He's
All
Uxbridge.
right, good. We just pulled him over to panelist.
Yep.
I
Trish,
will
Brian
be
knows that-
going. I will be going down the list of board members and asking you to start your video. If you want to start your video, go ahead and click on that. If you don't, that's fine too. I just want to give you the option. Back to you, Trish.
All right, thank you. I'll now do a roll call of each planning board. When I call your name, please state your name and affirm you are in attendance by stating aye. We'll start with the Douglas Planning Board, which is attending via Zoom from the Douglas Planning Board room. Chairperson Ernest Marks,
Aye.
Tracy Sharkey,
Here.
Michael Greco,
Here.
Jacob Schultzberg,
Aye.
Aaron Sokrat.
He's going to be 10 minutes late.
Thank you. Leslie Stevens,
Here.
Michael Zwicker,
I,
and is there town staff there supporting you?
no.
Great, thank you.
Bob and Eric's on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Hi, Bob.
Hello.
For the Sutton Planning Board, Wally Baker,
Present.
Michael Gagan. I saw Michael.
Aye.
Thank you. Robert Largess,
Aye.
Scott Paul,
Aye.
Kyle Bergeson,
Thought Kyle was here. Okay,
Not here yet. Nope.
okay.
Bill Talcott,
Aye.
and Town Planner Jen Hager.
Here.
Thank you. For the Uxbridge Planning Board, Barry
Yes, here.
Desero, James Smith,
Yeah.
Barry Hawk,
Aye.
Eli Lavadier,
Aye.
Joe Leonardo,
Aye.
and Michael Gallerani is your support staff. Thank you. We have a quorum of the participating boards. Would the boards like to consider approval of the minutes that were provided to you earlier? I will need a motion and a second, and then we'll have to do a roll call vote of each board. We'll start with the Douglas Planning Board.
By the way, can I announce that I'm here? It's Aaron Sokrat.
Yes, thank you.
Did I say that?
And I'll make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Jake Schultzberg with the second.
Thank you, Jacob.
Who was the motion?
Mike Zwicker.
Thanks, Mike. Okay,
And roll call, Ernest Marks,
Aye.
Tracy Sharkey,
Aye.
Michael Greco,
Aye.
Jacob Schultzberg,
Aye.
Aaron Sokrat,
Aye.
Leslie Stevens,
Aye.
Michael Zwicker.
Aye.
Motion carries. May I have a motion and a second from the Sutton Planning Board to accept the minutes of the February 25th meeting?
Well, Largest, I'd like to make a motion that we take the minutes from February 25th.
Thank you, Robert. Is there a second?
Michael Gagan will second that motion.
Thank you, Michael. And a roll call vote, Wally Baker,
Aye.
Michael Gagan,
Aye.
Robert Largess,
Aye.
Scott Paul,
Aye.
Kyle Bergeson.
Not here.
That's right. Bill Talcott,
Aye.
and that motion carries in Sutton. Thank you. And I have a motion and a second from the Uxbridge Planning Board to adopt the minutes of the February 25th meeting.
I, Eli Lavadier, make a motion to accept the minutes for February 25th.
Thank
The
you,
minutes.
Eli. Is there a second?
And Barry Honk.
Thank you, Barry. And a roll call vote. Barry Desereau,
Aye.
James Smith,
Aye. Aye.
Barry Hawk,
Aye.
Eli Lavadier,
Aye.
Joe Leonardo,
Aye.
and the motion carries in Uxbridge. Thank you. So we're here tonight for the continuation of the joint public hearing of the joint meeting of the planning boards of the towns of Douglas, Sutton, and Uxbridge, which was opened on February 11th. On our first evening on February 11th, we were provided a project overview by the project developers. Our last meeting on February 25th was focused mostly on traffic. This evening's meeting will focus largely on architecture, landscaping, including lighting, view shed, and HVAC screening, civil engineering, drainage, earth removal, water and sewer as it's mentioned, and other bylaw provisions, compliance, parking, access, trash handling, etc. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded and may be rebroadcast on community cable or YouTube. Minutes are being taken by Jen Hager of Sutton. In an effort to ensure transparency to our viewers at home and participants on other mobile devices, the chat and questions have been disabled again. We've also disabled any annotation function. In the event of a Zoom bomb or other disruption, please remain on the call. Our staff will work rapidly to isolate the offending party so we may continue the hearing. In this Zoom webinar format, that's very unlikely. The meeting tonight will proceed as follows. We'll have a presentation by the applicant. We'll have some comments from peer consultants. Planning boards will have opportunity to make further comment, and then we'll open it up to public comment after that. Prior to adjourning and leaving the meeting, we'll review any further anticipated next steps, review any potential meeting dates and meeting topics, and then we'll call for a continuation via the roll call and a motion to adjourn. At this point, I'd like to introduce the development team. As I state your name, please stay here and wave. For the applicant, Zachary Schweifler of Scannell Properties. I think I saw Zach.
Here, I'm here.
Thank Hi, Zach. Attorneys for the applicant, Mark Donahue and Todd Brodeur of Fletcher Tilton.
Aye.
Thanks, guys. Civil engineer Dan Feeney of Beals and Thomas.
Yeah.
I don't know if we have the traffic consultant, Vinod Kalakiri.
Here, I'm here.
Hi, Vinod. Yeah, we are. There you are. We're also joined this evening by peer consultants for the project. As I state your name, please say here and wave. Jeff Walsh, Graves Engineering.
Here.
Thanks, Jeff. Do we have anybody here from Greenman Pedersen? We've had Rebecca in the past. There's Rebecca.
Hi, I'm here.
And I don't know if we have anybody from Ecotech in the house. No, we don't. As I said, the developer made a full presentation at the February 11th public hearing meeting. On February 25th, Vinod Kalakiri made a comprehensive presentation regarding transportation and traffic planning and impacts of such. Tonight, we will focus on architecture, screening, civil engineering, and so forth. And as I mentioned, this will be followed by initial comments from the planning boards, peer consultants, and then finally by the public. This meeting is slated to now not last for more than 2 hours. This is the third of multiple meetings. We'll review any next steps at the end of tonight's meeting. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Todd and Mark to introduce the presentation.
Thank you, Trish. Todd Broder from Fletcher Tilton here on behalf of the applicant. This being the third meeting, I happen to be sort of taking attendance here and just wanted to note, we've had near perfect attendance in 3 of these meetings, and that's very nice diligence from the board members, which, the project team certainly does appreciate. With that in mind, we're going to jump right into architecture and view shed, and Zachary Schweifler from Scannell is actually going to walk you through those components. And I'm sure somebody's going to share a screen here in a second to start it off. Zachary?
I'm not going to share a screen. It's going to be Daniel actually, but I'll talk through it.
I'll share my screen, Zachary.
You're sharing your PowerPoint, not the one you hit present on.
What's that?
You're showing the PowerPoint, not the one that you're presenting on. You're just showing the.
You have to enter view, yeah.
Cool. So if we wanted to, I think, we've set this, used this slide to set up each of our meetings, kind of setting the stage and reminding folks where exactly the location is of the site. But so I'm sure everyone's familiar. We can probably just keep going. So, again, I think we've talked a number of times about this being really a space that's meant to be used for warehouse and design, and that we don't have a particular client yet. To that end, we've shown the actual build out that we're proposing to construct right now, which would be a large empty warehouse distribution for our tenants to be able to come in and put their racking and equipment in, with dock doors along both sides of the building along the length. And then we're forecasting a 30,000 square foot office. The intent would not be to build out the individual offices and floor plans within it, but to really leave that as open, dedicated space with a perimeter wall around it. And then we've got a few elevations to kind of show you. I think the important things here, right, is we show all the dock doors on the west and east elevations. On the south elevation, you can see the office and main entrance. There's glass along the office and entryway, and then clear story windows to provide light and visibility into the space, and then to help break up the vertical portions of the building itself. We're showing a building that's 45 feet in height off of ground level. It is important to notice, you will see in front of the docks, there's actually a recessed nature to them. So they're actually below ground level to allow the trucks to pull right back up into that dock. Trucks, vans, whatever commercial vehicle to pull right up at that dock and have material go right from the floor level of the truck, 48 inches off the ground, into the facility. All of this would be concrete, solid masonry structure. And then it would just be painted to be 3 colors of brown. And earthen tones to really provide some architectural design and features. And we show here a good number of reveals to help break up both the vertical and horizontal planes. But I think we'd look to kind of further dial this in as we get a little bit further. I would say that you'll see something very consistent to this, and we could actually build exactly what we're showing here. Keep going. So then we just went to show a couple of different aerials to help really see the site. So you've got the aerial from the southwest here that really gives you a good perspective of the entire site, all the development. You can see the retaining walls, and a little bit after we talk about architecture, Dan from Beals and Thomas is really going to walk us through the operation and flow of the site, as well as the civil design and some of the constraints and aspects that we're looking at. But at least from a view shed of the building, hopefully this will give you a good perspective, and we'll just kind of quickly cycle through a few others from ground level at different points around the property. So this is another view, a little bit more aerial, but just to show you really that entrance where we've got the commercial entry in front of us with that guard shack, and then our employee and auto and parking and entrance right behind it. And then just some neighborhood views. So this would be the view just south of the site from Lackey Dam when you're looking back from it just off of the interstate or off the highway. And then we've got 2 views from the highway. So this is the view from 146 when you're southbound, You can see there's a lot of foliage within the DOT's right of way that would really be screening in the property in addition to the plantings we've proposed. And then if you go from the other direction, which is northbound, you'll see that there's even more screening, kind of given the different perspective with the road being a little bit farther and higher. It makes it even more difficult, if not downright impossible, to see through to the building with all the foliage there. And then we've just shifted over just a little bit on that northbound to show you what it looks like when you're actually taking that ramp from Lackey Dam and coming up, because that gives you a little bit lower perspective, much closer. So again, you can see though with all the foliage that's there and or being planted by our current landscaping plan, it's pretty difficult to see the building at all from either of the streets, whether that's 146 or Lackey Dam. I think that was the last one that we had for the architecture. So I promise to keep this one really sweet and to the point, and hopefully I'll set a good precedent for Daniel when he starts going through the civil plans later.
Thanks, Zachary and Trish. Really, that was the presentation tonight on architecture, view shed. We're happy to receive any feedback that folks may have. Then we can set ourselves up for the next portion of the meeting, being the civil conversation. So we can certainly go through the boards and or consultants if they have comments at this time.
Great. So we've got Eli from Uxbridge has a comment.
So your views and everything were really great on 146. Really not concerning to us pretty much at all because that's a major highway. How about the views coming on both directions from Lackey Dam? You just showed like quick view of just coming on the off ramp, but how about on the other end where all the residents and stuff like that? What's the view that they're going to see across the street from all the residents?
So I think our intention was the view that we just looked at was that first residence as you're coming off of 146. That was actually, the pin was placed at their front door. But we can definitely prepare for kind of any follow-up. We can submit additional renderings to show you. I don't know if there is. We'll at least take the most northern portion, so you can see both from the south looking up and then from the north looking down.
Yeah, I get I don't really care about 146, and I'm sure probably everybody else doesn't really care what you see coming down the highway. It's more all those residents. There's a pretty significant amount of houses on going towards Northbridge side, where the houses are on the right-hand side. That probably would concern me more of what they're actually going to see and what type of foliage that we're going to bring into that, so they can pretty much block their view so they don't see this monstrosity building. In the past, they got lots and lots of foliage there. So I'd like to see something a little more significant on that side for them.
Thanks, Eli. Are there other comments from the Uxbridge Planning Board?
I actually had a quick question. During that, I didn't necessarily see, and maybe I missed it, was there any sort of sound barrier on the front of that building that wrapped it down around, Lackey Dam? I remember seeing the trees and kind of where the trucks enter when they pull into the guard shack. Was there some, because it looked to me roughly that the parking lot, there was a grade, you had a fill with some retaining walls and a fill for parking, or I'm just wondering, if it's going to be sitting up a little bit higher. Is there any sound barrier, again, for the neighbors across the street?
I think sound will be addressed probably at a different meeting, not tonight. So tonight we were really trying to focus on the architecture of the building itself.
Thanks, Barry. Other comments from the Uxbridge Planning Board? If none, let's go on to the Sutton Planning Board. Comments from
This is Michael Gagan here. I mean, I don't really have any comment other than, I thought the building itself, the design, the architect, looked pretty sharp, the color scheme. So But I hear the concern of others with what the residents who may, see it a lot more often than people on 146 will be looking at, so. But that's it. But otherwise, it looked pretty sharp, the building itself, so. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Anybody else from the Sutton Planning Board comments on the architecture?
Bill Talcott here. What's the height of the building?
It's 45 feet.
Thank you.
All right, and going on to the Douglas Planning Board. Any comments from the Douglas Planning Board?
Looks good.
Yeah, it looks good. The building looks good. I think the only thing, we'd like to see is probably because of the Oakhurst subdivision that's in Sutton, in the plan, is what's the plan for any type of sound protection, because that abuts the loading dock on the right side of the building. So that was raised concern regarding one of the Sutton residents who lives over there. So
Yeah, the two things.
yeah, any future, architecture things, we'd like to see it on the plan.
Yeah, the two things that the neighbor, this is Aaron Sokrat, just listening to the neighbor, closest neighbor, he said, no lights in his, they need to be baffled, and backups are to be turned off after a certain time, and, so he could sleep, the poor guy. So that's a mandate from us anyway.
Oh,
That's all shit. I can't.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? Really?
Thanks. Thanks, Aaron. Anything else from the Douglas Planning Board on architecture, landscaping, lighting, view shed, etc.? Do we have any comments from the peer consultants on any of those items?
Trish, this is Jeff Walsh from Graves Engineering. I have one thing about buffering, but I'd like to save it to when I speak of my review.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. So at this point, we're going to open it up to public comment on the architecture, landscaping, lighting, view shed, HVAC screening. And Carrie will help me facilitate that part of it, since she's really good at finding those raised hands someplace on a screen of 20 people.
Jen Hager actually has a comment.
Oh, look at that.
See, I'm getting good at raising my hand. All right. I did make some comments in my review letter. I would agree with Mike Gagan that the color scheme is very good. It's very light. It blends nicely. We always will place a condition that we have the right to review landscaping post installation to make sure the screening and the buffering that was intended is achieved. So I anticipate that will be at least one of Sutton's comments. The only thing that I, as I always do, my board knows this, comment on is particularly that front view shed of the building, especially if we're not going to have really solid screening on Lackey Dam Road. Then we would certainly encourage either that 30,000 square foot office portion be, pulled forward a little bit, or that you just have some kind of more kind of depth or character or whatever you want to call it on that front side of the building. So you don't have a ginormous 650,000 square foot rectangle, even if it is nice colors, that you have some kind of character really along the front facade at least. So I realize that's in Uxbridge. As I said in my review comments, I'm just going to make the same comments I make no matter what town it's in, and then each board can take my comments and do with them or not do with them what they want. So are we going to go separately into landscaping? Because if not, we need a lot more landscaping along Lackey Dam Road.
Michael Gallerani has his hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Jen just said. During our, when the department heads met with the team from Scannell, we talked about that needing a bump out on the front of that building. And I know there's been some discussion about maybe having some architectural feature that pays tribute to the significance of the Blackstone Valley in the during the Industrial Revolution, and kind of mixing in some materials that would give it some character, especially to go to Eli's comment about what people in the neighborhood are going to be seeing. It just makes sense that we figure a way to add something to that front of that building. And I agree with Jen. We've had this discussion previously. It makes sense for the offices to bump out somewhat. Doesn't have to come all the way out, but use that as the significance of doing something to the front of that building. Thanks.
Any other comments from the town of Sutton? Public comments from the town of Sutton? Public comments from the town of Uxbridge? Any other public comments from the town of Douglas? All right, seeing none at this point, does it make sense to now do the presentation for the civil engineering portion of this?
Yes, Trish, thanks. This is Todd again. Dan Feeney from Beals and Thomas is going to kind of walk you through some of those site features. He did a general overview in the first meeting, so he's not going to hit, necessarily those same topics, but along the path here, he'll try to answer some of the questions that have come up. And certainly, we expect we might hear from Jeff Walsh at some point tonight too, but for now, it'll be the Dan Feeney show.
All right, thanks, Todd. I apologize if my screen, if I'm going back and forth between being a little bit in the dark and then in the light. So I'm not sure what I can do about that, but I'll proceed with the presentation here for the civil engineering matters. Again, Dan Feeney from Beals and Thomas, professional engineer. Get this thing back running. Alrighty. So I wanted to start out with a little bit of an overview of the site operations out here. And I know we touched on it at the first public hearing, sort of how vehicles enter the site and go around it, but just to provide a little more detail on that. So the facility is proposed to be a 24-hour facility with 3 shifts. So the employees who are coming in and working in the office portion or in the warehouse portion that are parking up in front, the passenger cars, they come in off of Lackey Dam Road. They bypass the truck entrance and go up into the employee parking lot entrance. So we've kind of been through that. We anticipate approximately 300 employees across the 3 shifts. So we feel like the employee parking that we have is sufficient. The shift times are staggered a little bit, so it's not like you're going to have 2 shifts entirely there at the same time. And just a note as to the user of the building, obviously it hasn't been identified. There hasn't been a tenant or an end user identified for the building, but Scannell generally is working with Fortune 100 companies that have procedures and standard operations, regardless of their location. These are companies that are generally, spread out across the country or even the world, and they have their operations. So, we did get some comments at the first planning board hearing regarding queuing at the guardhouse and concerns with that. For the most part, a lot of the trucks have license plate recognition software that allows them to go through the guardhouse in a very quick time frame, just being directed to what loading dock or what trailer parking space they're going to bring the trailer to. Those that don't have it, it's a quick check-in process, usually under a minute, just to check them in and get them through. Based on the number of truck traffic and other vehicles we're expecting to go through the guardhouse area, we're not anticipating significant queuing at those locations. We do have sufficient queue length, and I have a slide further on that will show that you can get 11
trucks in from the guardhouse back out to Lackey Dam Road there. There is also a separate lane. There is 2 entry lanes. So if there is a truck that's taking longer to process to check in, there is a way for other trucks to bypass that. So the vehicles coming through the guardhouse and going to the loading docks and through the trailer parking, it could be tractor trailer trucks, it could be box trucks, it could be a percentage of vans that come through there. It depends on the end user of the property. It's typically this facility would be for goods coming in from the manufacturer or from a facility where the products are coming into the area. So it's not designed to be a facility where things are going out to individuals. They'll be going out to retail locations for the most part. There might be some direct customer deliveries, but we anticipate that would be a very small percentage of that. So when the tractor trailers are directed to their loading bays or the tractor trailer spaces, it's important to note that those things aren't typically processed in a day. So when you see, as many loading docks as we have, there's the expectation that those loading docks are being used, every day by a different vehicle or even multiple trucks per day. And that's not the case. There is, usually a surplus of trucks out at the site. So they're storing goods out at the site. They do get moved around the site from time to time, but trucks can be out there for days or even longer. So it's not, every loading dock is being used every day. We do have 4 drive-in doors at each corner of the building along the long sections of the building. That is mainly intended for maintenance vehicles. It could also serve as the ability to bring a vehicle into the building that doesn't have a 4-foot loading height to it. As Zachary had mentioned before, when we were looking at the building sections, all of the loading dock doors are 4-foot recess so that they can, trucks with a 4-foot loading dock height can back right up and be right at the building elevation. So for trucks that don't have that, there is the ability to have them come into the building to get loaded. Last thing I'll note just on the operations is that the truck traffic through the site is all back through the guardhouse. So it's not one way around the building. The vehicles will come in through the guardhouse, go to their intended location, and then when the trucks are leaving, they will come back through the guardhouse and come back down towards Lackey Dam Road that way. So that's sort of a quick little overview on the operations. I'll get into the site design now. And again, understanding that we gave a presentation on the 25th, I'll try to be brief and just hit some of the high points. First thing I just wanted to touch on is how the building ended up where it ended up, how the design ended up where it ended up. When we typically start looking at a site, there's any number of constraints that constrain the property and lead you to design it in a particular way. The ones that I've listed here in red are the ones that affect this site more than the others. So we obviously have some wetland resource areas and their associated buffer zones. We have utility easements. That's probably the biggest constraint on the site. There's some topographic challenges, and obviously being in 3 towns, we have some zoning criteria, some zoning bylaws that we have to meet. Bedrock and soil conditions, there's really no rock out on this site that we've encountered during the geotechnical investigations. The soils are generally good sand and gravel material. And there's no other constraints such as a conservation restriction or anything else like that on the site. So as I just mentioned, I talked about the utility easements a little bit, and the National Grid easement on the the National Grid easement that's on the northwestern side, northeastern side of the site. provides, a major restriction. Obviously, the building can't be located within that easement. Only limited amount of pavement can be in that. So as we look to try to bring the building as far back off of Lackey Dam Road as possible, the National Grid easement in combination with the Tennessee Gas Pipeline easement, which is shown in the purple on the plan, are a major constriction on that. As you come further up to the north into the site, the two easements are converging, so it limits what you can do. And obviously with a building of this size, with loading docks and trailer parking on both sides, it definitely does start to squeeze you down. So we try to get the building as far back as possible, but that was some of the constraints we were dealing with. Obviously the wetlands and their buffer zones do provide another pinch point as well. So moving on, this was the sketch that I had mentioned in terms of the 11 trucks being able to queue at the guardhouse. Again, you can get 6 double stacked in the 2 lanes and then more coming back. We don't anticipate ever having this type of queuing, but we were able to bring the guardhouse a sufficient distance off of the public right of way in order to accommodate that. Wanted to speak a little about the open space that's required in Sutton. So we will be responding to all of Ms. Hager's comments as well as the Graves Engineering with a revised plan set. We were waiting for both comments to come in. We got the Graves comments last Friday afternoon. So we've had a chance to kind of go through those now and start looking at how to accommodate all the different comments and respond to those. But we just figured we'd hit on the open space one tonight. It's something that's sort of a separate item. So what you see in the shade, the dark shade is the 35% requirement. Obviously, the regulations don't allow you to include utility easements in that. There's a fair amount of utility easements within Sutton, again, with the 250-foot wide National Grid and the 50-foot wide Tennessee Gas Pipeline. So those would be the areas that we would designate. We would see it as a passive open space area, given the use of the site and the surrounding Route 146 roadway there. One of the other things that's come up is the parking out on site in terms of the compliance with the zoning. I know Mr. Walsh during his review had broken it down a little bit by town. We were sort of trying to look at it as what each town would require. Douglas and Sutton, based on their zoning regulations, they have identical parking requirements for warehouse and office space. So taking the total warehouse and office, we had calculated 428, which is what we're proposing with the tractor trailer parking included. Uxbridge requires a higher level. I know that's a standard that can be waived. That would require 560 if the entire building had been located in Uxbridge. So if you do break it down, you're obviously going to come in somewhere between the 428 and the 560. The other thing I'll just note at this time, and Todd might touch on it a little bit later, is the ability or the potential for us to potentially land bank some of the tractor trailer parking that's located north of the building. So the remote tractor trailer parking, based on the end user, that might not be necessary, either all or a portion of it. So we would look at potentially being able to build that if needed, but not build it if it wasn't required. Obviously it'd be a benefit, to have a little bit less impervious if it's possible. So there will be waivers requested. I know Ms. Hager's letter did note compliance with different, I'll talk about a couple of them. The remote truck parking that I was just talking about is located within the rear setback. I will note that the abutter to that is National Grid. They actually own that portion of the land in fee, not just an easement in that area that abuts it. So it's not a residential or another business type use up there. That we are proposing the driveway to be 45 feet, this being primarily a truck use with a warehouse distribution facility designation. It provides for easier access for the trucks coming around the site. So we are proposing the 45 feet. For the interior lot landscaping and the unbroken rows of pavement, which is, requirements of the Sutton bylaw. We are providing a rain garden, and we can look at the landscaping within that rain garden and that landscape area that's in between the main access drive that leads up to the guard shack and the employee parking lot. We feel like it's a better design to have a bigger landscaped area there than to break up the employee parking. If we had to keep the same amount of employee parking and incorporate the landscaping into the employee parking lot, it would push down further to Lackey Dam Road and limit the ability to do the rain garden in there and to provide that larger buffer zone. We will have work within slopes over 15%. These are in areas of previous disturbance. It's not significant amount of area, but we feel like the site can be constructed without causing any erosion issues. We will have retaining walls as well. And again, in an attempt to get back to grade as soon as possible to limit the amount of tree clearing in various areas throughout the site. And then there is a 25% parking limit in front of the building. Obviously, with loading docks on both sides of the building, the parking really wants to be in front of the building. So we would be looking for that waiver as well. Within Uxbridge, there's a 100-foot natural buffer along Route 146, which we are maintaining other than right at the intersection of Lackey Dam Road and Route 146. There'll be some limited tree clearing in that area to accommodate a stormwater basin. So we will be planting trees back up in that area, but in order to accommodate the basin, there are some trees that need to come down in order to accommodate the grading for the basin. Stormwater management, I have a few slides on this. Mr. Walsh is going to go over his comments, I'm sure. So I don't think we have to spend a ton of time. I can certainly go into more detail at the end if there's a desire to do that. But when we look at doing a stormwater design for a development site like this, we start out looking at existing conditions and we look to identify what are the design points, where's the water going, what are the sensitive receptors, whether it's abutting properties, property lines, wetlands, culverts, things of that nature. And then we use a program called HydroCAD to model the flow to these design points. So it takes into account the tributary area, the land cover types, the soil types, as well as the topography, slopes. So by inputting all that data into the computer model, you're going to get a summary of the peak rates of runoff under existing conditions, and that sort of sets your baseline for what you have to match or be under for proposed conditions. So proposed conditions, we really want to locate basins where they make the most sense. On this site, obviously, the majority of the flow comes down to two major points, really. There are some internal wetlands that have some limited drainage areas from on-site areas, but really it's the intermittent stream that crosses under a culvert down to Lackey Pond near the intersection of Route 146 and Lackey Dam Road, as well as the wetland system along the edge of the property over by the National Grid easement. And again, that also drains through a culvert and down to Lackey Pond. So we look at where the basins also make sense from, in addition to topography, soil conditions. We want to try to recharge as much as we can. And then there's, in addition to the peak flow rates, there's 10 requirements of the stormwater handbook that we're going to meet. Some of them deal with recharge to groundwater and other aspects. So again, we'll run that all through the same model. It's an iterative process to design the basins in terms of the sizing of them and the outlet control structures from them. So that's how we kind of go through propose. And then we also have to design a stormwater conveyance system to collect the stormwater and get it to the basins. So, you know, I kind of went over the stormwater management, the 10 standards. I won't go through them all. It's in the stormwater report. Mr. Walsh can go through it as well, but we did document compliance with each of the 10 standards. And some of them are non-applicable, such as a redevelopment site or a critical area. And then these are just the drainage area maps that show the flow coming down. Like I said, EDA 1 and EDA 2 are the two big ones. The three wetland systems kind of at the northwestern side of the property. You know, EDA 4, 5, and 6 are very small drainage areas. And then there are a couple of low points on site that's a result of the former use of the property. So all of that flow that's tributary to those low points stays on site. And again, the proposed conditions, again, that just breaks it a little bit further down when you start looking at where all the impervious area is going. Quickly on the utilities, you know, we would anticipate that the water demand is probably going to be in the 4,500 gallon per day range, where you know, it could be a little bit higher than that. So we've accounted for that. The key component with the water is fire protection for the building, and the water line will be looped around the building with a fire hydrant spaced at 500-foot intervals. There's two options for water supply to the site. One is from the Whitensville Water Company. That's up near the intersection currently of Oakhurst and Lackey Dam Road. So it would come down Lackey Dam Road through Sutton, crossing into Uxbridge, and then we would propose to bring it up the emergency access road. So it's about 2,900 linear feet to get to the emergency access driveway for the site. It is the preferred option at this time, as it would be the shortest option to the site, and there's no need for upgrades associated with it. There is another option that's a plausible option coming from Douglas. Mr. Manerick from the town of Douglas has been extremely helpful. I know they're applying for state grants. It's just a matter of the timelines matching up when they might get the grant money, whether it will accommodate the construction schedule. The water service from Douglas to the site would require some upgrades to their system in order to provide the required fire protection to the site. This plan, the septic system is shown located in between sort of the guardhouse access road and Lackey Dam Road. There's 5 fields shown. That would provide for 9,000 gallons per day. Again, designed conservatively at this point with a little bit of an unknown as the end user. We are looking at doing the on-site septic system because the nearest public sewer is approximately 3,000 feet away, and it would require a pump station due to the grades at the site to get to the pump station. It wouldn't be able to make it there by gravity. I put this slide in just to show the existing vegetation out at the site. There is some fairly significant vegetation that exists down by Lackey Dam Road, sort of opposite where the building is and across from a number of the homes down there. So the intent is to try to keep some of that vegetation in there and then supplement it in there. As you start to come back into the site, you are getting into the building development area here. So a lot of these trees would get removed back off of Lackey Dam Road. But the next slide, this is sort of a blow up of that area. So these gray areas that are down in here, those are the existing trees that would be scheduled to remain. So again, trying to keep that buffer along Lackey Dam Road with existing vegetation that's mature in that area, and then filling it back in and supplementing. And there is a proposed retaining wall along the entry drive along here. And that is due to the site being in a fill there in order to get the site up high enough to work with the earthwork grades. So that's an overview of some of the more detailed civil engineering components. So happy to answer any questions or turn it back over.
Yeah, Dan, this is Todd. Let me just jump in for a second, and Trish, then maybe we can go to Jeff Walsh for his comments. But just touching briefly on the concept of the waivers, we're creating a list, a comprehensive list, which would be any of those matters that we may not be able to satisfy. And we're approaching it in a fashion where, as in Jen Hager's review letter, she comments on parking in the front of the building. Well, obviously the parking in the front of the buildings in Uxbridge, so not really part of the Sutton bylaw compliance, but for purposes of what we're doing, we're going to list them all out and suggest to you those places that we would need those forms of relief. And regardless of kind of their jurisdiction, at least for the time being, so people can understand where they're coming from. And that's the best example I can think of, but there may be others that fall into that category as well on the waivers. So, Trish, that was Dan's little overview for tonight, but certainly wanted to allow Jeff some time to go over his review and then answer any questions from folks.
Absolutely, Todd. Thanks a lot. So I think that does make a good sense to let Jeff kind of provide his comments on the civil engineering, and if he has anything further on the architecture or landscaping. Are we going to have, is there another presentation following that, Todd, in terms of other bylaw provision compliance around parking or access? Is there anything that we'll talk about after?
Not specifically a presentation, but we do, we do look to address some of those items. Yes.
Okay, great. So at this point, let's hear Jeff's comments. Do you want the site plan still up for reference, or should we stop screen sharing?
If we could leave this screen up for now, I think that will work.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much, Trish. Again, I'm Jeff Walsh. I'm a registered professional engineer, work for Graves Engineering. On behalf of Graves Engineering, want to thank the Douglas, Sutton, and Uxbridge planning boards and their staffs and town staff members from choosing our firm. We do have a good working relationship with 2 of those 3 towns, and we've done a little bit of work for Douglas over a few years ago. But nevertheless, thank you. We're glad to be working for you. I put together a letter, got out a little later than I would have liked, was issued last Friday, March 5th. I took the approach that I wanted to look at the site as a whole rather than look at the political boundaries. But nevertheless, with respect to compliance with the zoning bylaws, for the things I was charged with, the civil engineering type of issues, I tried to the best of my ability to look at each town separately and try to apply each town's regulations only in that part of the project for which where the project lies. So to that end, the first part of our letter, we break out the 3 towns bylaws individually, and our review comments pertain to only that part of the site that resides in each town. After that, for the rest of our review letter, the drainage, hydrology, stormwater, general engineering and engineering comments, I mean general comments, we looked at the site as a whole because I didn't want to be redundant, and I felt at that point, once we got the bylaw aside, it was easier to look at the site as a whole. What I would like to do right now is not go through my letter bullet by bullet, but I would like to go systematically through my letter and just call out what I feel is some of the more important points that the board members and their staffs want to consider as the review process goes along. And where necessary, I want to add a little more verbal detail tonight on a couple of the comments. So with respect to the parking and compliance with the zoning bylaw, I'm going to leave that for last. I'd like to speak to everything else but employee parking, and I'd like to get back to employee parking at the very end. So basically, I've calling out our comments. I've returned to the second page. There's a few in the Douglas zoning bylaw that I think are appropriate, not just for Douglas, but for the other towns where these features may be an issue, and that's recognition of where snow going to be stored. With the amount of impervious area, there's going to be a lot of snow, and I think it's going to be important as well as for not only compliance with the Douglas bylaw, but with the operation of the site is identification of snow storage areas, waste storage areas. I expect there'll be a number of dumpsters and so forth. I envision them probably mixed in around the loading dock somewhere, but I don't know. I think it's appropriate the plans show them. Those are comments number 4 and 5. Comment number 8, this has to do with the front of the building, and there's accessible parking spaces near the front of the building entrance. There's too much elevation difference between the finished floor of the building and the parking space to accommodate the accessible route up off the parking lot into the office area as currently laid out. There's ways to solve it. It's not, there's different ways to solve it as well. So I'd just ask that it be revisited by the design team. Comment number 10 speaks to the building height. I heard earlier tonight, I think it's a 45-foot or 49-foot building height, but nevertheless, I want to make sure we're clear. I know I've had in Sutton discussions over the years in technical review meetings about building heights with the town staff, including the fire chief, and I would think similar discussion needs to be had with each of the 3 towns in their fire departments, if not already done, about building height and the ability to comply with the bylaws and also be able to gain access for firefighting purposes. I recognize that the buildings are not inhabited. Moving on to page 3, number 22 and number 23. Number 22, this is the Sutton zoning bylaw. We just spoke of this earlier. It was landscaping within the employee parking areas. Number 23, again, has to do with building height. Number 27 on page 3. This has to do with the compliance with the Uxbridge zoning bylaws. There is a very specific requirement of 100-foot buffer along the numbered routes in town. And I'm applying that the on-ramp, the northbound on-ramp from Lackey Dam Road is part of the numbered route. And there's clearing proposed right up to a portion of the lot line down in the right corner of the screen here at the infiltration pond on the right. Thank you, whoever's got the mouse. So there's lack of a 100-foot buffer in and around this area. I recognize the focus for the folks along Lackey Dam Road would be the views from Lackey Dam Road. And I'm certainly sensitive to that issue as well. Right now, this comment here, I'm speaking of compliance with the bylaw and the intentions with the 146 overlay districts and the various Blackstone Valley communities that considered views from Route 146. Moving on to page 4. Again, number 34 has to do with screening for the waste facilities if there is going to be screening. Again, I would think that may have to do with where on the site these waste facilities would be located. That's it for page 4. On page 5, number 44, in the back, if Mr. Feeney, if you have the mouse, yeah, in that parking area in the back there, there's about 4, if I remember right, 4 catch basins or double catch basins along the upper side of the parking area out there that intercept runoff. And I'm concerned that it's a constant grade coming down to a low point. I keep grabbing for my mouse. Dan, if you could show us the low point of the 2 catch basins down a little bit, yeah, down around the intersection. Thank you. Down and around this area, that's a low point, which is fine. But there's about 4 catch basins farther to the left that if they don't intercept the flow, the low point will get a little extra water. It'll be impounded on the site, but nevertheless, I want to be careful that the catch basin inlet capacity is sufficient to capture what's expected during a design storm. There seem to be just a little under capacity, so maybe one more set of catch basins might be prudent based upon what I read in the rational method sizing calculations. The next comment number 45, speaks to the velocity of water in pipes. This is something that as engineers, we strive to not let the water get too excessive. The most important run of pipe that you don't want the water velocities to get too excessive is the last run of pipe, where the water is going to discharge out of the pipe system, either to a stormwater basin or to the discharge point, such as toward a wetland or a brook or so forth. There were a few runs of pipe where the velocities got a little high, and I asked the engineer to take another look at those. Moving on down to number 49 on the hydrology. They're on the west side of the site at the edge of where earth was removed, where the wetlands on the lower part of your screen, they're shown in green. For the most part, there was an earth, thank you. Yep, there's one down there. There's a small one in the middle, and then there's a larger one over to the left. For the most part, the earth removal activities, what I could see when I walked the site and what's shown on the existing topography on the plans, berms were left behind, roughly 3 or 4 foot high, maybe a little bit more. So water would typically not flow down to these wetlands from the earth removal activities. But there is one little area between wetland flags WF A13 and WF A22, where there's actually some concentrated flow coming from a portion of the site. Granted, it's a small portion compared to the rest of the site, but nevertheless, it's evident that there seems to be direct flow to that wetland. And I feel this is worthy of looking at as another analysis point in the hydrology, not only to look at attenuation of peak rates, but also to look at water budgets coming to that wetland, because that wetland does feed out to the right toward the intersection of Lackey Dam Road and Route 146. But nevertheless, I suspect it relies on some surface water or groundwater to feed it. And I want to make sure that from a surface water perspective, there's not a substantial change in volumes during a smaller storm event. Moving on, if we go to page 6, on the stormwater management, item number 53, information in the hydrology computations show roughly 32 acres of new impervious area. Having looked at the site plan, the existing conditions, knowing where most of the nearby wetlands are to the west and to the north. Obviously, there's the one to the east that's very evident, and there's the one, the discharge point to the southwest. But these smaller wetlands that I've been speaking of along the west property line and the ones up to the north, they're small depressions. And, you know, there is on-site, some low points on-site where stormwater runoff If it does start moving on the site, we'll get to these low points and will in fact infiltrate into the soils and recharge the aquifer in and around this area. And I suspect that aquifer is probably hydraulically connected to these small depressions that are undulations, if you will. And that's, the undulations, the low points, that's where the groundwater becomes surface water in the wetlands. So with the addition, I'm sorry, before I go there, in addition to that, I looked at the USGS map. It is on the cover sheet in black and white, which is fine, looks good. But also it's still the one in print, and that USGS map on the cover as well as the one still in print show the topography before the site had a significant amount of earth removal. The hills there are gone. The USGS does recognize there was earth, sand and gravel removal operations going on when the maps were made. But nevertheless, even the sands and gravels that are here, with the hills that used to be present, there was groundwater recharge occurring on those wooded areas before the earth removal even occurred. And hence, come forward, the earth's removed, there's some low points, groundwater recharge is occurring again. So to sum it up, 32 acres of impervious. The water is intended for recharge at the 2 infiltration basins nearest Lackey Dam Road. That means that the recharge has been centralized on the east side of the site and won't be able to feed the aquifer, if you will, on the northern and western sides of the site. So I think it's prudent to look at some decentralized groundwater recharge in the northern and western portions of the site. And those can be handled in a few different ways, whether they're open types of structures or subsurface systems. And I'm not necessarily advocating for those areas having full attenuation of storms up to and including a 100-year storm event, but there could be ways to get recharge to occur in these northern and western areas to try to replicate the average annual recharge of smaller storm events and still rely on the open basins for the attenuation of the larger events. Sorry for the long-winded discussion about that, but I think that needed more discussion than what I put into the written letter. Just about done except for traffic. Number 58 on the same page. This has to do with hydraulic design, and I won't go into the details of it, but if you can picture a manhole with a smaller diameter pipe and a larger downstream pipe, in order to use the total height of cross-section available in the downstream pipe, the upstream pipes, you got to match pipe crowns to be hydraulically efficient, we say. And I'll just leave it at that. And that is it for the things that I wanted to highlight, with the exception of employee parking. There's a number of comments in here in all 3 sections of zoning bylaw comments for each of the towns. There's also some discussion in general engineering. My take on parking, when we see parking calculations, is we're trying to, as engineers, we're trying to provide enough parking for the people that come and use the facility, whether it's just employees or employees and customers. The truck parking spaces, I look at that as a function of the facility and its use. As an example, let's talk for just a moment about an automobile dealership. When I look at the number of parking spaces required for an automobile dealership, that would be for the employees, for their customers, and for cars being worked on coming in from service. I don't consider for an auto dealership inventory parking to be the required number of parking spaces. Applying that logic to this project here, I'm looking at the employee parking, the 178 spaces along the front of the building, And those are the spaces available to support customers coming and going, if any, and employees. The 478 spaces, to me, that's kind of looking at apples and oranges, whereby the spaces associated with trailers and loading docks aren't available for employee parking. Again, that's a function of the use of the facility. I want to be sure that there is adequate employee parking for the shift of greatest demand. And also, if there's some overlap of shifts, want to make sure that we don't have a situation like at a sporting event where 2 teams and their families are on the field and another 2 teams and their families show up. And during that interim, there's not enough parking, but during the game there is. So to that point, I don't have answers. I know there's been discussion. I know your traffic peer review consultant has also weighed in. And I think they put it very well in their letter that the parking demand for a facility like this could be highly variable. And to that extent, I tried to structure my comments. Comment number Comment number 57 on page 6. I tried to structure this comment in looking at the parking demand as a whole, trying to look at compliance with the various zoning bylaws, but also looking at another source of information, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation report. And I recognize I'm one edition old. Freeman Peterson has cited the 5th edition. I will say that unlike the trip generation document put out by that institute, parking generation doesn't have has not nearly as much data yet. So it's still tough to quantify parking, but yet it's a good source, and it's only getting better with each edition and with the additional data that it brings in. But nevertheless, looking at the ITE trip generation, parking generation requirements, my feel is they're about in the right ballpark, possibly. Looking at compliance with the zoning bylaw, woefully short. But then again, the types of facilities, the changes now compared to even 15 years ago on warehousing and such could be, and the automation of what's inside these buildings sometimes could reduce the amount of parking demand. So to me, this is a working project, but it warrants very detailed and much more consideration to make sure we don't have parking problems. And lastly, on that point, I do feel that land banking, reserve parking, whatever we want to call it, it's a prudent way to set aside some land area, whether it's grass spaces that could be converted or even loading areas of truck parking spaces somewhere proximate to where passenger vehicle parking would be prudently located. Land banking or reserve parking is a valid way to allocate space if it's found after the fact that there's more demand, or even if users change over the years. And as long as it's an enforceable type of concept and enforceable to the towns, it could work. Trish, that's all I have, and I'll turn it back over to you, but I'm not going anywhere tonight. I can answer the questions.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Any questions to Jeff at this point? Otherwise, we're gonna go through a couple other folks. Eli, I see you do have your hand up. I'll come back to you in just a second, but any questions real quick from Dan or Todd or Mark or anybody else on the development team? And I know there's lots of opportunity to get back, but anything just on the top of your minds right now?
If I might, Trish, it's Mark Donahue, Fletcher Tilton. Let me just touch base on the last point that Jeff was making and tie it a little bit with Mr. Feeney's presentation, because I think Jeff is right on that in the real world, parking is highly variable depending on the type of user. Where our analysis started for parking and the design of the site was to achieve conformity with the 3 zoning bylaws. And we have substantially done that to be able to comply with the dimensional and parking requirements. The reason why, as Mr. Feeney indicated, we're suggesting land banking, for lack of a better term, the northerly or plan left parking area is specifically because the final configuration of those spaces, whether they are tractor trailer areas or full truck areas or passenger vehicles, will be determined to great extent by the first user of the facility to build what they need to be able to meet their particular demand. We believe that obviously the parking on the south side will be used in all events, so that's there. But we see the northerly side as the opportunity to make it fit for the first user. And if they don't need all of it, it provides the capacity for a subsequent user to be able to expand and meet those needs. So I think our design and our desire for the northerly side is consistent with what Jeff is suggesting as part of his review. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Todd, anything, Zachary, Dan, anything else to Jeff's comments?
Well, Trish, I would just say, Jeff had a lot of technical comments, and certainly Dan and his team will work to communicate those, communicate on those concepts with Jeff. So we're hoping that there'll be some back and forth between the consultants, and perhaps by the next meeting in 2 weeks, we'll be able to come back and have satisfied a lot of those kind of technical, should you add another drainage basin or increase the pipe size type of question. So we certainly appreciate Jeff's review and his presentation tonight. I don't know if Dan has anything else.
No, I'm all set for now. Certainly we'll be drafting a response letter. And if there's any questions, we can go to Jeff either through Jen or if there's any intermediate questions as we get into it and look at it a little bit closer.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to give Rebecca Brown at Greenman Pedersen an opportunity if she had any further comments. I know her focus was more on the last meeting, but I know that there's been a little bit of discussion around some of the queuing and parking and so forth. Rebecca, do you have any comments you'd like to add at this time?
Sure. Yeah, I think that Mr. Walsh already did a great job of talking about the parking comments, so I won't really add too much about that. Otherwise, we only had a handful of comments that were really related to the site layout. Most of our comments really focused on off-site traffic impacts, but we did have a handful on the site. One being a recommendation to provide a sidewalk connection down to the security gate so that people would be able to have a clear walking path to get down to the security gate, particularly where there is a pretty substantial grade separation there. So they wouldn't be able to walk directly from the employee parking lot down. One of our other recommendations was to also put a snow clearing area on the site, particularly if it is a tractor trailer truck operation, to make sure that those trucks can get the snow cleared off of their vehicles before entering out onto the roadway system as well. Aside from that, we had some comments related to the location of the security station and just making sure that the queuing wouldn't extend back out onto Lackey Dam Road. I think that was already addressed tonight in the presentation. And some additional recommendations for some stop signs, stop lines to be added at key intersections throughout the site. And again, that'll largely depend on what the actual parking layout ends up being once the tenants are identified. But having stop signs located at the ends of the employee parking and at the end of the security gate as it comes into the main access point, and then going out of the site onto Lackey Dam Road as well. And that was essentially it for the site circulation comments that we had.
Great, thanks, Rebecca. Anything back at that, Todd, Dan, Zachary? Any kind of comments back to Rebecca on her comments on your plan?
I don't think so right now. We'll try to put together a comprehensive response with regard to the parking and submit it. So it'll be part of the record.
Great, thank you. So at this point, I know that there have been there's been the opportunity to submit comments from the public. Jen, are you able to summarize any of those that have been received from your office regarding the site plan?
We did receive some written comments from Patrick Steffen, who was at the last meeting. So we do have those on file. We received some written comments / minimum condition recommendations from the Sutton Fire Department. So those are now part of the public record as well. And I believe that was all, other than the flurry that we got on the actual night of the last meeting, which I think I went through that night. So those are the two newest comments, Steffen and Sutton Fire.
Great, thanks. And I just want to remind folks, whether if they're attending the webinar or listening in, that there is the 3-town PB hearing at cmrpc.org if you have comments or questions about anything on the top related to this project. That will be send an email to Jen, Mike Gallerani, and the planning staff in the town of Douglas. So at this point, I want to kind of go back to the planning boards themselves. I know Eli has his hand up, so why don't we start there in the town of Uxbridge, and then I'll let Carrie kind of facilitate the public comment if there is any. I believe we have a handful of attendees who are not panelists. So let's go to Eli and Uxbridge at this point.
Hi, so Dan, I think this is Dan Feeney was the one that did the presentation, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Dan, thank you. That was a good presentation. One of the things that struck me off really on the whole presentation was your water coming down Lackey Dam Road with water. And I know I made comment of this before, and I think I'm gonna, I think maybe all of us boards can look at it in a close perspective of when the contractors dig up the roads, they put the roads back in a complete disaster and they create complete potholes. And I know Lackey Dam just had their road completely paved and now there's a gas line that runs down through it. I know Uxbridge just repaved that part of the road all the way to the where the proposed building is going to be. I think we should really look at is if they're going to dig up the road and put water there, we should have that butterflied and repaired to almost original state. So the road's not like completely disaster potholes like every other road in these towns are. And vice versa. If they're coming from Douglas way, the same way. Galbello Road it's in great shape. There's no potholes or sinkholes that are going through that way. So they should be repaired and to original state. And then my other comment is about the whole parking thing, like everybody's commenting. Why can't we shrink the building a little bit? You know, make the building a little bit smaller in the lengthwise, keep the width, make the length, and get an extra row of parking for the employees. Enough just to make another row of parking for that. So that's my two comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Eli. Are there additional comments from the Uxbridge Planning Board?
Yeah, Trish, just Barry DeRusso.
Thanks.
My question is, I actually have probably a couple of them and some statements. On the plan itself, and you can't really see it so much on this. I mean, maybe if we zoom in, I don't think there's dimensions. The entrance of the driveway on Lackey Dam is 45 feet. And the entrance turning in where the trailer trucks would turn into the guard shack is also 45 feet. They said that they're stacking for 11 trucks. That's if you got 6 stacked in at the guard shack. My problem is we don't know who this potential customer could even possibly be. So if we have, like, on this plan, if we zoom in toward the guard shack, I don't know who's in control of this plan. There's an island right in the middle on the entrance turning into the guard shack. So now you've just taken your 45 feet and you've actually condensed it down to a smaller number. Add snow bankings in the wintertime, it gets even smaller, especially on a radius like that with a truck. My concern is the trucks out toward Lackey Dam. If you only got 45, if, you know, let's just say this is 20 feet really at the end of the day, let's just say that's what it is, 20-foot width. And you're single stacking trucks, you're really only going to get maybe 8 out to Lackey Dam. That truck is going to be blocking half that entrance. Now, if you are in the middle of a shift change, you're creating a hazard on Lackey Dam. You're creating a hazard for, you know, employees trying to pull in, heading north and south. You know, add trucks pulling out. I don't think that you have enough stacking for the current trucks. I don't know the distance from Lackey Dam to the guard shack. We in Uxbridge have been through this enough times that I know this is a problem, especially if they're going to be on Lackey Dam. You know, we have the problem with DJs right now on Quaker Highway. It's not always a problem, but Quaker Highway is a pretty wide state road. Lackey Dam is not necessarily a very wide road. That is probably one of my biggest concerns. Again, employee parking spaces, we're all going to sit here, beat a dead horse. It is what it is. I know Jeffrey mentioned it. It was one of my thoughts. Snow removal, where you stack in the snow in the middle of a storm for the parking. I know. I think it was mandatory on one of the projects we just did. There's no electrical charging spots, and that's something that I think the state is kind of forcing. And I know going through this process, we're probably gonna have to go through DOT. They're probably going to force electrical charging stations in the parking area. With that, see, we're in the same area. You're looking at doing a septic here. I would much rather see a sewer system hooked to this. You know, Walmart, they went through the same process of, you know, giant septic system, had nothing but problems and had to later on run the sewer up the street in order to connect. You know, these are all single family homes across the street. I would hate to see something happen with that septic and going across the street to all those other homes with, you know, wells and things of that nature. There was also, I don't remember, somebody mentioned it, but I did have it on my list, is the trailer trucks. Where is an area where they're actually removing the snow off the tops of the trailers in the event of a snowstorm, in and out, and dumpsters. And, you know, I think my biggest concern, I'm not against this at all. It's my biggest couple things that I mentioned before was sound barriers for the neighbors, but not knowing what the potential is here. And I think that's probably, I'm probably not the only one on all these boards, is we're making assumptions on something that we don't know. And that's a big concern of mine regarding parking spaces, traffic, how fast we're running trucks through this facility on Lackey Dam. You know, and those are just my 2 cents. You know, I don't want to eat up all the time here. Let everybody else kind of have a piece. Thanks.
Thanks, Barry. Any other additional comments from the Uxbridge Planning Board or Mike?
None here, Barry.
Great, thanks, Barry. Joe? All right.
No comments.
All right. Why don't we go to the Douglas plan? Yeah, yes, sir.
Trish, this is Todd.
Hi, Todd.
Sorry, if you
There
don't
you
mind, let me just pop in for a second to offer
Sure.
a few thoughts. I guess first on employee parking. I think when we thought about this site, when Scannell thought about this site, I mean, they have a particular type of user in mind with a particular type of operation. It's driven all of what has gone into the site design. It's driven what you see in the traffic report. When you relate that to employee parking, we've talked about 300 employees over a number of shifts. We provide 178 employee parking spaces in the front of this building. We're suggesting we have excess capacity on site in that northerly lot, which we don't think we will need based upon experience and what's going on, with similar types of users. We can use that for employee parking. We can use it for trailer parking. We're showing it as trailer parking because we don't think we need it as employee parking. So we don't want to add more parking to the site, I guess is the overall kind of comment there. But we do feel like we have sufficient space to kind of call an audible and go to employee parking if necessary. And that was the point that Mark was making. It may be that we understand perfectly well what this first generation user needs, and we think we do. Second generation user may be slightly different, but we have this area, which is a bit of a flex area, and we can provide some parking if needed in that area. We certainly don't want to, make a broad statement that we'll never need it, but the idea is not to put more parking on site if at all possible. And so, it kind of goes to Barry's comment. While we don't know which sign is going to hang on the building, which tenant is going to be named for this space, we do understand the category of the user and the nature of their use. And we do know that this site satisfies what the industry tells us are their needs. So, I think we're while that gives people some uncomfortableness that we can't name a tenant and therefore you can't go see what it operates like in such and such a municipality, we do understand the category here. And, this is meant to be a warehouse distribution use, and it's not meant to be some of the other uses that are out there at this particular time. And the land use category we used in the parking, in the traffic, speaks to that. And this is the best that we can do to design this at this time without naming a particular tenant. But we do know that category that they are in. So, I think we think the parking is appropriate, but again, we have that flex area. And I think, to the extent that it continues to be an issue, we can call it out as employee parking if we need to. But right now we've directed it as trailer parking. Thanks, Trish.
Thanks, Todd. At this point, let's go to the Douglas Planning Board and open it up for comments. How's it going over there in Douglas?
Good. This is Mike Zwicker. I have two items I'd like to bring up. The first one is on the Inlet Road. Is that a single lane or dual lane? Will the trucks be kept to the right so they can queue into the guard shack? And then employees stay in the left lane to get up to the upper parking lot? Next question I have is, it's been great, everybody's talking about sound and noise and everything. What about headlight glare? We need to have something set up there where your trucks are taking a corner coming out of that guard shack, going in and out, and they'll be parked at that guard shack. And their headlights, 24-hour operation, and everybody knows there's nothing worse than headlights shining in your front window 24 hours a day. I don't think it's been brought up or addressed at all for headlights. That's a couple things that I have. Headlights will be a big deal, especially during the summer months when everybody has their windows open, shades open. 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody has to get up at 6. You don't need to have headlights shining in your window 24/7.
Thanks, Mike. Other comments from Douglas Planning Board?
Hi, Trish, Ernie Marks.
Yep.
In regards to the de-icing area that's proposed for the trucks in the winter, is that just going to be a de-icing, or is that a full truck wash bay or area? And if it is that being designed so that it meets with the new MS4 regulatory concerns, so that it's just not going into the storm drains and into the catch basins and going out. Because there's a lot of salt that's gonna be coming off of these trucks when they're being washed, and a lot of road material that comes off of these trucks. So I wanna make sure that it's going to the right place and not out into the storm drains. And I haven't seen a design for that yet.
Great, thanks, Ernie.
Trish, with your, I'm sorry, it's Mark Donahue.
Sure, absolutely.
With your permission, I'd like Mr. Feeney to address both the issue just posed with regard to the de-icing area and also go back to the traffic circulation of the previous question, just to try to get those responses while the question is fresh.
That sounds good. Great. Dan?
Sure. On the de-icing versus truck washing, there wasn't an intent to provide truck washing on the site. The de-icing comment came up from Greenman Peterson. So we're evaluating where best on site that could be incorporated, based on the logistics of the site. So again, when we reply to all the comments and submit updated plans, that'll become more evident. Mark, do you want me to do the question on the single lane versus the double lane? Is that?
I think so, Dan. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So right now it is designed as one lane coming in off of Lackey Dam Road heading up to the truck lane. The 45-foot pavement width does give us some flexibility in that area to after you come in and the truck can get turned and get straight to potentially stripe that. So we'll look at that. We'll go over it with VHB as well to take a look at that area down there.
Thanks, Dan. Are there further comments or questions out of the Douglas Planning Board?
Yeah, just Mike again. The reason I brought that up on the double lane is we all know in the real world, you have the trucks stacking up in queue and somebody needs to get to work and they're running a little bit late. Everybody's gonna be cutting around all these tractor trailers to get in that parking lot. So it becomes a real major safety issue. You get cars cutting around all these trailers and trucks, trying to get in to go to work because they're stacked out on the Lackey Dam Road. So the single lane, you're gonna create none of that. Your backup queue on Lackey Dam, you said it's for 2 trucks. Now you just said 1 lane, where's your employees gonna go? So it's gonna be a big issue.
Sure. Jeff has his hand up. I don't know, Jeff, did you want to respond to something there?
Yes, it's fresh in our mind. One of the board members brought up the concern of headlight glare from trucks queued at the kiosk, the guard shack, if you will. I think it's worthy of an evaluation by the design team. The ground elevation at the guard shack is about 14 feet higher than the front yards of the properties across the street. Excuse me. But that doesn't mean there won't be glare into the second floor windows of some of those properties. There's a little bit of a downgrade as a truck leaves the kiosk and starts to go into the site and turns left. There's a little bit of a downgrade there. So there might be some headlight getting low enough to look into the windows or glare into the windows. So I think with a little bit of cross section or something like that, the applicant's team could look at that. And I think if there is a problem, there might be a way to maybe create a little backstop, if you will, for headlight glare outside the guardrail or something like that. So I wanted, while that's fresh in everybody's mind, I think there's a way to look at it and possibly even address it. While I'm on this subject too, earlier in the evening, Trish, and I'll be brief, there was talk of the view sheds from Lackey Dam Road to the same point of the elevation difference between the abutting properties and the ground surface around the building and the building's height and so forth. I think if there's going to be some view sheds prepared from Lackey Dam, similar to what they were from Route 146, they take into consideration the elevation differences and so forth. You might find that there's certainly going to be retaining wall seen, but I'm not sure how much of the building will be seen. But nevertheless, I think it's important to really have a good look at it not just in horizontal, but in elevation as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. And any final comments out of Douglas before we move on to the Sutton Planning Board? I know we're kind of getting low on time here, so I just want to. Okay, great. Thanks, Douglas. From the Sutton Planning Board, Wally, folks, do you have comments, additional comments that have not been raised tonight, or?
The only comment I would have is we get a person from Sutton talking about lighting. I assume this would be the lighting, in all those areas with the truck bays and so forth and so on. And that never came up tonight in the presentation. Is what type of lights they have, how far out they're going to go. My second comment is I appreciate the comments from members of the Uxbridge board, since they've had experience in these matters more so than what we have. And you bring a lot of interesting thoughts to mind, shall we say. Other than that, I'll just wait and see the final details whenever next week.
Great. Other comments from the Sutton Planning Board? Mike, Bob, Bill?
If we might, Trish?
Yep, sure,
Mark
Mark.
Donahue. It might be worth, since the question was posed with regard to the lighting, if Mr. Feeney has an opportunity to just briefly review the nature of the fixtures proposed and the impact as far as the photometric plan.
Sure, certainly. Dan, do you want to?
Sure.
address that?
I off the top of my head, I can't recall the exact height. I think the poles are around 30 feet high. There'll be cutoff shields on them. The photometric plan was submitted as part of the initial application. So it's designed so that there's, no light escaping the site. Back to 0 foot candles by the time you get down to the Lackey Dam Road pavement surface. So there won't be any light escape coming from the property, from the site light, site lighting fixtures on the property to abutting property owners.
Thanks, Dan. I think Jen has her hand up there.
Yeah, just two follow-up comments. In our preliminary meetings with the, before we started through the public hearing process, we had talked about how there would need to be a lot of cut and fill and the potential for a lot of earth to be moved off the site. And we had thought about if there was an opportunity to use some of that soil to create kind of a berm along Lackey Dam Road, even if it's inside the vegetation that you would retain, that would serve a dual purpose of both creating a visual block, but also earthen berms being a really exceptional noise attenuation device. So I just didn't know, that definitely didn't make it through to the plans. I assume primarily because you have a lot of basins up against the road. And then the other thing on lighting is we have found on several sites, particularly in our industrial park, where the photometrics plan shows no light spill onto adjoining properties, but due to elevation change, cars driving by and or nearby residents actually end up looking kind of up into a bulb. So the light is not shining off the property, but the light source is still visible from another property depending on the elevation. So we just want to be careful with that and make sure there's none of that going on with the lighting, the light bulbs, the actual fixtures being visible from a distance because of elevation change. So those are the two things I had.
Thanks, Jen. Do we have other comments from the Sutton Planning Board?
I do have a comment. Bill Talcott, did we address the noise issue, backing up these trucks, 24 hours a day?
Mark, Todd, Dan, do you have a response or regarding noise?
Sure, I could try to take it just at a high level. We've requested an analysis by a sound expert for the site. We're expecting a written report shortly that we'll be submitting and probably presenting to this board in the future that will touch on the impacts of sound emanating from the site from a number of different sources. So let us get to that report so you can have a chance to digest it and then bring the right people into the table so you can discuss it with them.
Great, thank you. So at this time, I think we've heard the presentation from the developers. We've heard comments from the peer consultants. We've heard comments from each of the planning boards and staff. We've heard about any of the comments that have been received outside of the hearing itself. At this point, we're going to open it up. We have 3 attendees of this hearing who are not panelists, and we want to offer them the opportunity to make any comments. Since we're a small group of attendees, we're just going to call on you, and then Carrie is going to elevate you to a panelist and unmute you so you have the opportunity. You don't have to say anything, but we're just going to give you the opportunity. So we kind of streamline this as opposed to having large gaps of silence where I just keep asking anybody to make comments. So with that, we're going to start with Pat. Pat, do you have a comment that you would like to add to tonight's conversation? And have we unmuted Pat, Carrie?
No comment. I'm all set. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for attending this evening. We appreciate your participation. Okay, great. How about Beth? Beth, thanks for attending. Do you have a comment or a question that you would like to put forth tonight? Did we elevate Beth?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I have a question. I'd like to know that the street elevation.
Beth, can you tell us your name and which town or street address that you're from?
Oh, okay. Beth Strosky, 7 Summerfield, Uxbridge.
Thank you, Beth.
Yes, I was wondering what's the street elevation and what's the elevation to the very top of the building?
Good question. I don't know if we have a easy answer for that one right away, or if that's something that we'll come back to her with. Seems like it's something that Dan might be able to come up with an answer for.
Yeah, the street elevation, obviously it varies depending on where in the street you are, but it's around 330, again, based on where you are on the road. The floor elevation of the building is, I believe, 359. Adding 45 to that, you'd get 404. They do that right? So
you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Beth. And lastly, we have a caller on the call-in listener. I'm going to read off the phone number. 1-508-330-9075. I'm not sure, Perry, if you can panelize that person and unmute them.
I gave them talking permission, but I can't panelize them.
Okay, great. You have talking permission. If you want to introduce yourself and which town you're from or where you're from, this is your chance to provide any comments or questions. Okay, well, again, there's 3-town PB hearing at cmrpc.org. If there are other questions or comments, either from somebody who is on the screen in front of me or somebody who's listening in either live now or in a rebroadcast of this hearing. At this point, I know that there's still more to be discussed. It seems like there will be a future hearing. Hang on just a second. There will be more in terms of responses on some of the comments and questions that have been raised around parking, lighting, facade design, drainage, noise. I know that Todd and Mark and Dan will have responses in some way and are going to be redesigning and coming up with responses to some of these comments. At this point, we will probably continue the hearing. We'll have to vote to continue the hearing and adjourn this meeting. I think what we did in the last meeting was we did that in one motion with each of the boards and then did a roll call vote. Does that seem appropriate to everybody?
Yes, and Madam Chair, this is Todd, just
Yep.
very quickly. Wanted to mention, we certainly plan to revisit traffic, probably as a front topic at the next hearing. And, I think as we kind of meander through here, we're going to touch on a lot of the different topics at the next meeting. So I wouldn't take anything necessarily off the table for discussion. So we've got to start to kind of, get to the end of some of these issues, so.
Absolutely. I don't know that there's a designated date for the next hearing. I think that may be up to you guys in the time frames you need to develop your responses. So,
I think we were going for 2 weeks out, Trish, so March 25th.
Yeah, okay.
7 PM.
So that will tentatively be the next meeting date. There will be agendas posted in accordance with open meeting law. So unless there are further comments, suggestions, questions, Jen, do you have something?
No, no, just make sure the motion to continue is to the time and date certain, so March 25th, 7 PM, along with the brilliant way you did it last time, combining that with the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. We'll start again with the town of Douglas. We would like a motion to continue the hearing to March 25th at 7 PM via Zoom. And we will also, addition to that motion, and a motion to adjourn this meeting from the town of Douglas. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And who was that?
Mike Zwicker.
Thank you. And a second?
Les Stevens.
Thanks, Les. And a roll call vote. Ernie Marks,
Aye.
Tracy Sharkey.
She had to leave.
She had to step up.
Great, thank you. Michael Greco,
Here.
Jacob Schultzberg,
Aye.
Aaron Sokrat,
Aye.
Leslie Stevens,
Aye.
Michael Zwicker.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And from the Sutton Planning Board, do I have a motion to continue this hearing to March 25th, 7 PM via Zoom, and to adjourn this meeting?
Bob Largis, I'll make that motion.
Who was that?
Bob
Bob
Largis.
Largis.
Bob Largis, thank you. In a second.
Michael Gagan, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Michael. And roll call vote. Wally Baker.
Aye.
Thank you. Michael Gagan,
Aye.
Robert Largis,
Aye.
Scott Paul,
Aye.
Bill Talcott,
Aye.
and Kyle Bergeson never came, right?
No.
Great, thank you. The motion carries in Sutton. Can I have a motion in the Uxbridge Planning Board to continue this hearing till March 25th at 7 PM via Zoom and to adjourn this meeting?
So moved.
And who was the
Eli
first?
Lavadier.
Eli Levadier moved it. Who, and is there a second?
Second. In sequence.
Is that Barry Hawk?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. You guys should start a choir. Barry Des Russo,
Aye.
James Smith,
Aye.
Barry Hawk.
Aye.
Eli Lavadier. Eli.
Aye. I hit the wrong button.
Joe Leonardo.
Aye.
Thank you. And the motion carries. So thank you all for participating again this evening and for inviting us to work with you. With that, I think we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you for everyone's participation. Watch the town websites for the posted public hearing meeting notices. And again, if there are 3-town PB hearing at cmrpc.org for any kind of comments beyond the meeting. At this point, good night and thank you very much.
Night.
Night.
Good night.
Trish.